Hello everyone, today I would like to talk about Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. This is the book and this is a summary. Jane Eyre ranks as one of the greatest and most perennially popular works of English fiction. Although the poor but plucky heroine is outwardly of plain appearance, she possesses an indomitable spirit and a sharp wit and great courage. She is forced to battle against the exigencies of cruel guardians, a harsh employers, and a rigid social order, all of which circumscribes her life and position when she becomes governess of the daughter of the mysterious, sardonic, and attractive Mr. Rochester. However, there is great kindness and warmth in this epic love story, which is set against the magnificent backdrops of the Yorkshire moors. Ultimately, the grand passions of Jane and Rochester is called upon to survive cruel revelation, loss, and reunion, only to confront with tragedy. There's 15 characters in the book, and I want to identify each of them. The main character is Jane Eyre. Her age begins in the story around 10 and ends in her early 20s. She is orphaned as an infant when both parents die of typhus. She is small, plain, and unpretentious in appearance. She is never considered herself beautiful. She is highly intelligent, perspective, and deeply moral. She has a fierce temper as a child that she gradually learns to control. But she passionate but governed by a strong sense of principle and self-respect. She is talented and painter. Refuses to be defined by class, money, or gender expectations. Her central internal conflict is the battle between patience, her love to Rochester, and principle, her moral code. Edward Rochester. His age around 35 to 40 during the story. He is dark, brooding, and physically imposing but not conventionally handsome. He is sarcastic and blunt in speech, but capable of great tenderness. He was trapped into a deceitful marriage with Bertha Mason in Jamaica for financial reasons. He has traveled Europe for years, taking mistresses including Celine Varens, trying to escape his guilt. He is deeply lonely and spiritually restless before Jane arrives. His love for Jane is the most honest relationship in his life. Loses his sight and one hand in the Thornfield fire. Regains partial sight of the end, enough to see his and Jane's first child. Rosamond Oliver, a genuinely beautiful and kind young highness in the Moor House area. She is sincerely in love with St. John River. St. John River admits he finds her beautiful but refuses to pursue her. She represents early happiness and warmth that St. John deliberately denies himself. She eventually marries someone else. Mrs. Fairfax, the elderly housekeeper of Thornfield Hall. She is warm, gentle, and domestic. A calming presence. Jane initially mistakes her for the owner of Thornfield Hall. She warns Jane to be conscious about Rochester's attention before their engagement. She disappears from the story after the wedding disaster. Her fate is not fully detailed. Mr. Brocklehurst, the hypercritical and self-righteous headmaster of Lowood, preaches poverty and humility to the girls while his own family lives in luxury. Publicly humiliates Jane in front of the whole school by calling her a liar. Represents religious hypocrisy and the cruel misuse of authority. Miss Reed. She is Jane's maternal aunt who resents Jane from the beginning. She promised her dying husband she would care for Jane, but never truly accept her. She is cold, proud, and class-conscious. She tells Jane's uncle, John Eyre, that Jane died out of spite, nearly ruining Jane's inheritance. She represents the cruelty of a society that discards those without money or status. Helen Burns, She is Jane's first true friends, met at Lowood School, deeply philosophical and devoutly Christian. Preaches patience, forgiveness, and endurance in the face of cruelty. Her philosophy directly contrasts with Jane's very sense of justice, bears punishment and humiliation without complaint, which both frustrates and moves Jane. She dies quietly of tuberculosis, while Jane holds her. Her influence shaped Jane's spiritual and moral development throughout the novel. Bertha Mason Rochester. She is Rochester's legal wife, originally from Jamaica, described as a wild and violent convent to the third floor of Thornfield. Her family had a history of mental illness, which Rochester claimed was hidden from him before their marriage. Represent the dark, repressed, and passionate side of the novel. She sets fire to Rochester's bed in one scene and later burns Thornfield entirely. She dies jumping from the roof of the burning Thornfield Hall. Saint John Rivers. He is tall, classically handsome, and cold as marble. A clergyman of intense religious ambition, wants to be a great missionary martyr. He suppresses all personal emotions and desire in service of his mission. He is secretly in love with Rosamond Oliver, but rejects her because she doesn't fit in his missionary plans. He treats Jane more as a useful instrument than a person he loved. His proposal to Jane was more of a command than a romantic offer. He represents the danger of fanaticism, duty without warmth or humanity. Jane respects him but ultimately refuses to be consumed by his cold ambition. Miss Temple. She is one of the few genuinely good authority figures Jane encounters. She treats Jane and Helen with dignity and fairness. She defends Jane publicly against Mr. Brocklehurst's false accusation. She acts as a mother figure during Jane's year to Lowood. Her departure from Lowood to get married triggers Jane's desire to live and seek a new life. Adele Verens, a cheerful, lively French girl of about 7 to 8 years old. She's the daughter of Rochester's former mistress, Celine Verens. Rochester doubts she is his biological daughter, but cares for her out of obligations. She loves pretty clothes, dancing, and performing, very French in manner. Jane treats her with genuine kindness and patience. At the end of the novel, Jane moves Adele to a better, kinder school. Blanche Ingram. She is beautiful, tall, and accomplished, and utterly arrogant. She openly dismissive of Jane as a mere governess. She pursued by Rochester as part of a deliberate scheme to provoke Jane's jealousy. She represents the shallow, class-obsessed value of aristocratic society. Despite all her advantages, Rochester feels nothing real for her. Patsy Lee, the nursemaid at Gateshead, who was one of the few people to show young Jane any affection. She tells Jane's story and sings her songs. She reappears briefly later in the novel and tells Jane that the Reeds has all suffered misfortunes. She represents the small kindness that sustain people through difficult childhoods. Richard Mason. He is Bertha's brother who traveled from the West Indies to stop Jane and Rochester's wedding. He described as handsome but weak-willed and easily frightened. He previously visited Thornfield secretly and was attacked and stabbed by Bertha. His intervention is pivotal. It is the moment the entire truth about Rochester's marriage is revealed. Diana and Mary Rivers. They're St. John's two sisters and Jane cousins. They're warm, intelligent, educated, and genuinely welcoming to Jane. They work as governesses before Jane's inheritance allows them of financial freedom. They serve as models of what capable, independent woman looks like. Jane is so much closer to them emotionally than to St. John. The settings in Jane Eyre. The story begins at Gateshead Hall, the cold, unwelcoming home of the Reed family where Jane grew up as an unwanted orphan. The most memorable room is the Red Room, where Jane is locked in as punishment and believes she is a ghost. Jane is then sent to Lowood Institution, a harsh charity school that is cold, damp, and poorly fed. She spends 8 years there, and it is where her dear friend Helen Burns dies of tuberculosis. The most iconic settings is Thornfield Hall, Rochester's grand but mysterious manor house filled with dark corridors and secrets. It is here where Jane's fall in love with Rochester's, where Bertha Mason is secretly kept locked away, and where the house is ultimately burned to the ground. After fleeing Thornfield, Jane wanders the wild moors alone, nearly dying from cold and starvation before taken in by the Rivers family at Moore's house, a modest and warm home where she discovers they are her cousins. Jane briefly settles in Morton village, teaching at a small school for poor girls and finding her independence. The story ends at Firdeath Manor, a small, secluded house in the wood where Rochester has retreated after losing his sight. It is here where Jane and Rochester finally reunite and marry as a true equals. So overall for the book, the rate is 7% because the story is kinda complicated, but it's still fun to read. Thank you.